MovieWeb.com.
Duncan, how you doing?
I'm really good. Nice to meet you.
All right. This is what I would call a very high concept movie.
Yeah.
Right? But the concept about the future and energy is actually not nihilistic as we would normally see, but putting this one character's position into the entire world's energy market is a pretty fascinating idea. How'd you come up with that story?
I met up with Sam Rockwell about 3 years ago, and we met up for another project which was way too ambitious. We talked about it and we were like, no, this is not the right thing for a first film. But we got on very well. I was a huge fan of Sam Rockwell's as an actor already, and I knew that I wanted to do a film with him. So during that first meeting, we started talking about science fiction films and the kinds of acting roles that Sam would be interested in doing. And there was this period of science fiction films from the late 70s and 80s with films like Outland and Silent Running and Ridley Scott's Alien, where you had these kind of very blue-collar, guys and women that were put into these unique sort of alien environments. And we thought, those films were about people, but they were science fiction films. And we thought that's the kind of film we want to make. So Moon sort of came out of that meeting, and I really wrote the story based on having had that meeting.
That's good stuff. Let's talk about Sam a little bit. Sam is, one of the premier character actors of his day.
Yeah. And
in this film, he's the lead and supporting character.
Yeah.
When he's dealing with his clone.
Yeah.
It's a really brilliant performance. Talk about directing him as far as, obviously you're using, I guess, green screen or some kind of technology to do both parts. What was that like?
You're absolutely right. I mean, Sam is probably one of the most underrated, incredibly talented actors, in the United States today. I'm a huge fan of his, as you can tell. My producer was incredibly supportive and knew that in order for Sam to do this role, we were going to need rehearsal time. So before we shot the film, I came to New York, met up with Sam and one of his acting friends, a guy called Yul Vasquez, and the three of us just basically, broke down and worked our way through the script again and again to give Sam the real opportunity to get a real sense and feel for the scenes, and also to be able to differentiate between the various versions of Sam that Sam Rockwell plays. So we managed to get a lot of work done in the rehearsals up front. But then when we were shooting as well, there was a lot of questions that Sam had for me about the character's background and why he was doing the things he was doing and why the company sort of was set up in such a way that he was going to be there on his own. And I had to be kind of on my toes all the time and ready to be able to answer all of the questions that he had. But I think because I was prepared and because he was prepared, we were able to do this.
All right, let me ask you a question about the other primary character, Gertie.
Yeah.
Voiced by Kevin Spacey, who's a little robot that kind of helps Sam out in this lunar digging thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
At first, I was thinking Hal.
Yeah.
And very 2001.
Absolutely.
But then Gertie has a very, very caring part. I want to ask you about how you wrote that character and the decision to have that little screen that shows the moods, which I thought was pretty ingenious.
Gertie is absolutely, paying homage to Hal from 2001. And what I wanted to do, we pay homage to quite a few different science fiction films, but what I tried to do is, wherever that happened, I wanted to play with the audience's expectations a little bit. And that's a good example. Hal obviously is a character who we learn not to trust over the course of the film. And with Gertie, I wanted the audience to make the assumption that they should feel the same way about Gertie as they do about Hal, which is why I think Kevin Spacey's voice was really incredibly important, because it does lure you into the same feelings as Hal's voice does. And then obviously Gertie ends up being a very different character. The little smiley faces, the emoticons, which the idea was basically that the company that set up this base doesn't have the greatest amount of respect for Sam, who works up there. And in a very patronizing way, they've kind of decided, well, if this blue-collar guy needs to interact with a machine, we're going to give him a very sort of simple interface. We'll put these little faces on him so that he kind of understands what it is that Gertie's trying to say. The fact that he's trying to be lighthearted here, or he's trying to be very supportive here. And that came out of my own use of emoticons when I type all the time. I get very insecure when I use lots of technology. I use lots of MSN and Twitter and all of these social networking tools. And whenever I write anything, I always want to put a little smiley face on there to let people know, I'm just kidding. I'm just being lighthearted here. So that's kind of what came out of my own weaknesses.
Yeah, it was interesting because you would expect it to be more sophisticated as far as its approach to Sam. The fact that it wasn't. It's very interesting. All right, let me ask you a question about the production design.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is an indie film. You're in a tight budget.
Yeah.
But you really took your budget to glory. I mean, especially when comparing to the outside
Thank
scenes and the inside scenes. It
Yeah.
looks very futuristic as you'd expect it to.
Yeah.
Talk about, you know, those problems and who you worked with to get that set up.
Well, I'll start off by telling you, I don't know if you know this, but it was $5 million budget. So, you know, it's a great budget for an indie film, absolutely tiny budget for a science fiction film. What we did is we had an aesthetic that we absolutely loved from these old films, like Outland and Alien. And there's guys like, Ron Cobb, Douglas Trumbull, Sid Mead, Ridley Scott's films, all of these old films that have this beautiful aesthetic, and it's much more industrial, and it doesn't look like it's been designed by Apple. You know, it's got a very different aesthetic to it. And what we want to do is create something like that that we could do on a budget. So we created the interior of the base with this one aesthetic, with the sort of that looked like those old films. And then for the exteriors, what we used is model miniatures, which is a technique which just doesn't get used that much anymore. And we were able to create this hybrid where we would shoot. You know, we created a 40-foot by 30-foot lunar surface, and we're pulling these kind of Tonka truck-sized models across it. And then using, you know, we had the benefit of modern post-production techniques. So we're able to shoot those model miniatures and then add a layer of post-production on top of that to beautify it and actually sort of get rid of all of the fishing line that we're using to pull the models across and add star fields and all these other things that we were able to do. So I think it gives it a very unique look, but certainly helped work this look for our budget.
It looks fantastic, and I'm not just saying that.
Thank you.
All right, my last question for you. You got a great eye, right? I was very surprised by how cinematic this film was for such a small story.
Yeah.
What's the future for you? Where do you see yourself going after this?
I very much appreciate that you feel that way, and I thank you for that, because it was a struggle to visually get the aesthetic that I wanted on the budget we had and with the time we had, because we were having to move so fast, and there were so many restrictions because of the special effects that we wanted to pursue, that we did pursue. Hopefully I'm going to do another science fiction film with a slightly bigger budget, you know, slightly more time to do it. So I think I can really create something visually even more interesting. It's going to be a more Blade Runner-y feeling film. It's going to be a thriller that takes place in a future Berlin, and it takes place within the same timeline as Moon. So Sam's going to come back hopefully and do a little cameo in it to sort of explain as an epilogue what happened to the character of Sam at the end of Moon.